Thank you, Mr. Chairman, very much. Last week, I sent a letter to Secretary Kerry expressing deep concern about the situation in the DRC and in particular, President Kabila's apparent attempts to delay elections and stay in power beyond the time allowed under the DRC's constitution. As I wrote my letter, President Kabila has played an important role in the DRC's path from war to relative stability, but that very progress is now threatened by his apparent intent to defy his country's constitutional foundation. This apparent attempt to subvert the Constitution appears to be part of a growing trend in which President Kabila's government feels free to defy the DRC's laws. We have seen it in the closing of political space, violent repression, closure of media outlets. We also see it in the government's general suspension of exit visas for children adopted by American families through the DRC's court system. In my letter, I stressed the need to build on your efforts to persuade President Kabila to move forward with the DRC's presidential election as required under the Constitution. I believe it is critical that we clearly and unequivocally communicate the following 3 points to President Kabila. Number one, he should immediately, clearly, and publicly state that he will not remain in power once his term ends this year. Two, provided there is verified on-the-ground progress towards a free and fair national election this year, including an end to the current efforts to close political space and crack down on peaceful dissent, the U.S. and international partners will help fund the electoral process. And three, if he fails to meet clear benchmarks required to hold a free and fair election this year, then the United States and other partners will implement targeted sanctions on President Kabila and his inner circle. Could you comment on what actions the administration is anticipating in the event that President Kabila does not allow for free and fair elections?
Thank you, Senator Markey, and the letter was certainly received, and we appreciate, again, the attention being paid to the Great Lakes. We think this is a time, and I hear this from the Congolese people all the time, where they appreciate the sense that the eyes of the world are on this moment in the country. I think there is a lot of pride, while we certainly talk about our own policy under President Obama of emphasizing constitutions and term limits. The reality is that this is the Congolese people's constitution. It's their decision overwhelmingly to support term limits. It's their position that they've supported their own constitution and open political space and pluralism. And I think they see this with a great deal of pride as having been something that was forged out of an incredibly brutal and difficult period of multiple wars and suffering. And I think the desire right now is not to be for or against any individual, but to be for a better future and better constitution. And I think there's strong appreciation that the United States government has been there to support the Congolese people and that hard-fought constitutional space. As Assistant Secretary Thomas Greenfield noted, we have pursued a variety of both positive and negative incentives in looking at the situation in DRC and communicated clearly and in advance that there will be consequences if certain actions are taken that undermine democracy or undermine security. We've seen the U.S. government's willingness to do that in Burundi in sanctioning both members of the government for acts of repression as well as members of the opposition. In the case of DRC, we already have an executive order, as I mentioned, 13671, that gives us the ability to consider those actions. The hope is still that this is going to be a historic opportunity where the government and opposition and others come together and figure out a path forward. But the stakes are so high in terms of potential human suffering, but also the inevitable regional components of dynamics in the DRC that we want to do as much before this becomes a crisis as we can. So
my concern is that it's obvious what Kabila is doing and where he's going, and that he understands how hard the United States is going to come down on him and his cronies, on him personally, on his cronies personally, so that he is made a symbol of international reproach, and that we have a plan in place that he clearly understands that will be imposed upon him, and that we will not stand on the sidelines on this issue. In March of 2015, more than 400 bodies were found buried in a rural part of the country. Human Rights Watch has suggested that some of the bodies were those of individuals who had died in anti-government protest over a proposal to delay the 2016 presidential elections. The 2 television channels that were shut down were owned by a former governor of the province in Katanga, who is known to be a strong political opponent of the government. And so there's a clear progression with regard to what is taking place in this country. There's a long, unfortunate history in this country. So is the United States committed to taking strong action in the event that Kabila does, in fact, continue down the pathway that he is progressing?
May I? Absolutely, Senator, we are. We have used every diplomatic level at the highest level to impress upon President Kabila the importance of him stepping aside. It is unusual that he would get a call from the president. He has gotten visits from the secretary. We are encouraging him to make the right decision, and it is our hope that he will make the right decision. The consequences of him making the wrong decision, the horrible consequences of him making the wrong decision, is the impact that this will have on his people, and him ruling a country that is imploding around him. Having that situation happen in DRC is much bigger than what we've seen happening in Burundi. So that's the biggest consequence. But in terms of using the tools that we have to apply sanctions on him, there's no hesitation to do that. I think the important thing is that we have to get others in the region to support us in that effort, and that is something that we're working on as well. President Kabila has a legacy already. He kept this country relatively peaceful over the past few years. That legacy is going to be lost. His reputation will be lost if he does not gracefully leave power and have his country continue to proceed down the road of democracy.
Thank you.